for more on this decision today of Zuma being granted leave to appeal last week's medical parole ruling, let's speak to legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala. Mpumelelo, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. I did not follow every word during the ruling today and the arguments that were put forward to court, first up by Advocate Dalimpofu and then the other counsels who were representing various applicants or respondents in this matter. But for you, what was the nub of the issue here that led the judge to say, okay, Mr. Zuma, you have the right to for leave to appeal?
Afternoon, President. I think the first one was the one of saying, I may have erred in saying that you must go back to jail and we must disregard the time that you've already spent at home. I think in the wider definition of when is a person detained, do you have the liberty of going in places where you want to go at your own discretion without seeking permission first from the Correctional Services facilities or the authorities? If the answer is no, then you are still being detained. Now, to say that you must come back and serve a fresh sentence, I say this in inverted commas, it almost amounts to punishing you in a double sense. I think that was the most compelling reason why this particular matter should go to the eNCA according to the judge. The second one is saying, we haven't really defined what does it mean to be terminally ill, because there are various stages of being terminally ill and various definitions, both technically and both in a wider definition. Also to say that a person is physically incapacitated, what does that mean? What does it mean in terms of medical parole and the powers in which the commissioner would have? So if all those things have not been answered, and they would be better answered when you go to the eNCA or even when you go to the Constitutional Court, it is better for me, or the chances or the prospect of success are still there. If there's a slim chance that they can succeed there, let me allow them to go to the eNCA. Probably the judges that they would have or would hear a much more refined submissions, so that at the end of the day they are able to plow or provide a very good jurisprudence when it comes to the interpretation of the Correctional Services Act, while you are balancing all the provisions that are applicable as per the South African Constitution.
Okay, so the issue of compassion and the issue of empathy came out at the beginning in one part of the exchange between Advocate Dalimpofu, acting on behalf of the former president, and the judge. Could also that have been a factor in him finally deciding that because of the former president's age and the fact that his legal team insists that he is ill, could the compassion factor and the issue of empathy have come in? I know the law is said to be a very cold instrument.
Definitely. It could come in this sense. There is something in criminal law which is called the thin star rule, which says you must take your victim as you find him. So in this case, the judge may have extended that particular application in terms of saying, I want to look at the personal circumstances of the former president within the scope of the former president, not as a person who is well, who is able to live a healthy life, who has a good health status. I want to look at him as a person who is sickly, as a person who is terminally ill. It may be that he's able to survive within the correctional services facilities if he has certain aids or if he's given medication. But I want to understand where exactly is he coming from. But I can't close my eyes to the circumstances that brought him here. Just remember, he did not kill anyone. His only reason why he's in prison is that he's in contempt of court, and it is an order of court that punished him in that particular manner. So in determining whether a decision to release him is lawful or not, and the consequences that follow thereafter, I can't close my eyes to the injustices that he's going to suffer just because someone else in another position took an incorrect decision or took an incorrect stance. So in doing that, I can't then ban him in this unlawfulness conduct and disregard his personal circumstances. I wouldn't be doing any justice to him and also in upholding his constitutional rights if I ignore those particular facts. So that is why his health status and the way in which all his personal circumstances were then taken into account. And maybe the judge was also giving a small hint to the eNCA judges to say, when you look at this matter, don't close your eyes to this particular fact because it is important as we move forward, especially in the protection of the rights and also in the interest of the health of the prisoner or of the former president in this case.
Now, the other respondents who were opposing it, in my view, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a lawyer, listening to some of the arguments, they were more focused on the technicalities, let me say, of the law as it stands in terms of the various sections and how parole is said to be interpreted and applied, rather than this factor that we have just you have just outlined. In your experience, will the Supreme Court of Appeal be open to such embracing such an approach?
It would depend on the circumstances, but what the SCA would do will then say, we do not want to cause any injustice to someone. Let's look at who's correct and who's wrong. In this case, the decision maker is the one that said you must go out. So the former president did not walk out of prison out of his own will. He was given authority and given permission to do so. Where that person that gave him permission did so rightly or wrongly, he can't be punished for that particular wrong decision. And let's then extend and look at the definition of being detained, meaning you are deprived of your freedom of movement. If that is the case and I've been deprived, sending me back to prison is not going to achieve anything, because at the end of the day, I've already been punished indirectly for my own sins, if I may put it in that sense. So the SCA will then move and say, let us adopt a wider approach when it comes to the consequences that follow after this unlawful decision has been taken. And let us make sure that we do not punish the innocent party who did not take part in the decision-making process, however, is simply the receiver of the incorrect decision at the end of the day. It wouldn't be justice to punish someone just because someone at another end of the spectrum decided that I'm going to do this particular process on my own. But with that being said, maybe it is time in which we adopt a wider interpretation of the word of being physically incapacitated, a wider interpretation of the word terminally ill, so that at the end of the day, we bring an end to this sort of muddy water or not clear stance of saying when should a person be released on medical parole, and exactly the stances and the powers in which a commissioner would have in order to release someone on medical parole.
And finally, Mpumelelo, before I let you go, very briefly, in the bigger scheme of things, sitting back, having followed last week and today's ruling, today's ruling was not a surprise, therefore, that we could be here where former President Jacob Zuma is granted leave to appeal.
Not at all. I wouldn't even be surprised if this matter was going to end up at the Constitutional Court. The type of principles and the interpretation that are required here will at the end of the day require the justices of the Court to decide on this matter once and for all, because it's going to keep on coming up. There are a number of parties which are going to be implicated, or it has an impact on them. Previous inmates that have already submitted their medical parole applications. So it is better that we bring finality to this matter. And the only way to do that, let's take this matter to the Court so that at the end of the day, the true competing rights are able to be decided upon, and we have a clear legal precedent on how to interpret the Correctional Services Act when it comes to medical parole.
Thank you very much for your insights. Mpumelelo Zikalala there, he's a legal analyst.